Okay, today we're going to talk about 4.2 soil formation and erosion. We all know how important soil is to basically everything. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe the characteristics and formation of soil. To accomplish this goal, we will describe how soil is formed and describe the soil horizons and what can erode away our precious soils. First, we should cover what is soil. I think by now we've cemented the idea that soil and dirt are not the same thing. We can't use them interchangeably. But what exactly is soil? So soil is made of 45% minerals. So these are the broken down pieces of the parent material, the rocks that eventually became this soil. 25% of that is made up of airspace, 25% is water, and only 5% of it is organic matter. And this organic matter we call humus, Humus, not hummus, like the food. And the humus has microorganisms and other organic matters such as roots. So, where do the soils come from? Soils are formed when parent material is weathered, transported, and deposited. As we've learned from primary succession, we start with no soil, and soil begins to form over time when it's weathered by rain or chemically weathered by our pioneer organisms such as lichens and mosses. Over time, they break down these parent materials into what's called horizons, and the soil becomes more stratified with the larger um, fragments of the parent material at the bottom, and then as you get closer to the surface, it gets finer and finer. Fun little fact for you, it takes at least 100 years just to make 1 inch of the precious topsoil at the top of our soil horizons. So not all soils are the same. We can see here we have the Alabama state soil, looks very different when compared to the Connecticut state soil, which is very dark brown on top and then has a light brown layer down below, versus the Alabama soil, which is much lighter here and then turns to a red. So soils are formed based on a couple different characteristics, or a couple different processes. One thing that impacts the soil is the climate. So the precipitation and the temperature where the soil originates from, where that parent material is from, determines how fast it weathers and what the eventual mineral composition of the soil is. So this is why the biomes all have different types of soil, because they all have different temperature and precipitation amounts. We can also be impacted, our soils are impacted by the topography. So the slope of the land determines how quickly that parent material and the subsequent soils are eroded away, so washed away, and where they're deposited and how much sunlight they get. So this is going to change the organic matter in the layers in our soil. Next, we have time. More more soil. As I said in the previous slide, it takes 100 years to make 1 inch of topsoil. The more time you have, the more soil you'll get. Then we have the plants and animals. So the organisms that are in and around the soil eventually decompose, adding nutrients to the soil. They aerate the soil by stepping on it. They add moisture. They can prevent erosion by adding vegetation. And then again, we're back to the parent material. So the type of bedrock that you start with determines the composition of the soil. So this is what determines the types of minerals you can have in your soil. So for example, Connecticut is in a deciduous forest, the temperate seasonal forest. Our soil is very fertile because we have these seasonal changes of the leaves falling, which get decomposed because of our warm temperatures and higher precipitation, which recycles those nutrients back into the soil. So as I mentioned, the soils have horizons, and these are the stratified layers of the soil. You can usually see a pretty decent change in the composition in terms of the size of the particles and the content in these particles. So let's look at this a little closer. So we see that our soils, we've got the zone of leaching and the zone of accumulation. These are the areas where the rain enters the ground, takes those minerals from the microbes, and pushes them down into a lower layer of the soil. So let's look at these layers a little bit closer. So the soil are categorized based on their composition in organic material. So you're going to need to know these designations over here, O, A, B, and C. So O is our organic O layer. So this has the organic matter, that humus that is about 2 inches thick, but that varies based on the biome. And this is where you find the dead plant material. It could be like decomposing leaves. In A, we have our topsoil. This is 5 to 10 inches thick. Again, depends on the biome. Has a lot of organic matter and minerals. This is where our plants grow and the organisms live. Next, we move to B. This is the subsoil. It's mostly made of clay, has a lot of iron minerals and organic matter that's washed down by the rainwater. So our zone of leaching is A, zone of accumulation is B. Then we get down to C, the parent material from which the upper layers originated. So this is a lot of the large rocks. Sometimes you'll also see one down here that's our solid bedrock. So here's an example of the soil horizons. It doesn't always look quite so clear, and the levels of these soil horizons really depends on the biome that they come from. So soils are important. Soils are necessary for farms, and they're necessary for a healthy climate. So these soils can be eroded or blown or washed away by winds or water, as was seen in the Dust Bowl. Here's examples of the soils that are being eroded away by water. So it could be the erosion of riverbanks. It can be flooding and eroding in fields. And why we want to protect our soils is because soils impact our water quality. Soils effectively filter and clean water that moves through them. So different sizes of the particles trap different sized contaminants and will improve your water quality. So to summarize, our goal is to describe the characteristics and the formation of soil. Today we learned that soils are created from the weathering of bedrock over time, and that soils are a product of several factors, including the climate, the animals and plants that are found in the area. We've learned about time, the topography, and that soil is broken up into layers called horizons, which we will practice memorizing. And that is your introduction to soils.